Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Live Out Your Potential, a Solid Mind podcast series. My name is Claveri Rakoze, and I'm pleased to welcome two distinguished guests, Freya de Klerk, one of the clinical psychologists here at Solid Mind, and Mark Guamaka. Mark is a churchman, he's a pastor, husband, father, and peace activist. He works for the Aegis Trust, which is an international organization that works for prevention of genocide worldwide. Welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Somehow tired. Let me hope it doesn't show on my face.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for accepting my invitation. Today's conversation is going to be about men's mental health. As you might know, the month of June is dedicated to men's mental health globally. And so with you, we are going to dive deep into this critical conversation. And I want to kick off with Mark. Mark, how do you understand mental health, men's mental health?
To me, it is a state of mind, a state of being, where, you talked about me being a churchman, where the body, the spirit, and the mind are all in sync, where someone's hormones are fully balanced, but also the environment around them helps them to be at peace within, but also with the environment around them. So that to me is the mental health, but also in particular for men, that becomes also part of the environment, which they contribute to, but also shapes them for the inner man and also the outer man.
So given the definition you have just given, do you think we can observe someone and say he's mentally okay? Is it something visible?
I would say yes and no. Yes, because with mental health, when your mental health is disturbed, you're going to show certain characteristics. You're going to show certain things. I think in particular for men, some of them might refrain from their families. Some of them might show anger. Some of them might show depressive responses to different stimuli that come to them, and many, many other things. In that aspect, when it gets to that level, you can say we can see part of that. But also how they relate to the environment around them, how they treat people, how they do that. So you can see that there are things that are happening that seem to be off. But also know in that some people might be walking around and we don't know because they have mastered a way to respond to the environment around them. So we seem to be okay, or they might seem to be okay, and you might not know it. That means with a layman like myself, you might not know what it is, but yet it's there. So that's why I said yes and no, because in some circumstances, you might see some of that, but in other circumstances, you might not be able to see it.
Before I go to Freya, as someone who is involved with different groups, networks, church, what are some of the common misconceptions surrounding men's mental health you've encountered in your different networks?
So firstly, men in general, most men are going to be lone rangers. I don't know if you know what I mean by that. They're going to be...
Tell us more.
We're most likely going to be people who want to do things on our own without the help of the others.
Invisible.
We feel like we're invincible. So when it comes to mental health, we're going to miss out on the community aspect because we want to deal with things ourselves and within ourselves. So one of the misconceptions would be that people want to do it on their own. So because they want to do it on their own, then they make it a thing that is going to be, when you open up to others, then it becomes a no-no. So that's one of the misconceptions that I'll see. The other misconception would be that some men will think that it only affects women, and when they speak out, then they're becoming weak. So that's a misconception itself. Instead of thinking like this is a place where I am and I'll be affected by different things, so that becomes an issue. And the fact that most men are not going to go out, they're going to find replacements. So they'll go to bars and they'll spend the whole evening, they come back late in the night as a coping mechanism, and that becomes a defense mechanism with other men. But the problem with us men being with other men, we might talk about every other thing but our mental health and things we're going through. So we'll talk about football, we'll talk about women, we'll talk about children, we'll talk about school fees, we'll talk about business, we'll talk about every other thing, but we'll not talk about the things that are difficult for us. And I feel like those are some of the misconceptions that we have. And because of that, it's also due to many other reasons. But yeah.
Thank you very much. Freya, I guess Mark has just touched on different aspects surrounding the misconception. But I want to ask you, as a professional mental health psychologist, what do you think is preventing men from seeking mental health support?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for inviting me, even though I'm not a man. So whatever I'm saying here, I'll say it with a lot of humility. And of course, whenever we have clients in front of us, we always say it's not the absolute truth. It's just a ground for thoughts and discussion and reflection. And I'm therefore very happy that Mark is here to kind of guide us in this discussion as well.
I'm not a professional. I'm speaking from a layman's perspective, but yes.
So when we talk about, when we see here people who come and who are in the search of a form of healing related to an experience or a hurt that they've encountered, the first thing that we do, or one of the first things that we do, is really help them explore those emotions. Many times we go through something and we disconnect ourselves from emotions, when in fact those emotions are really key in terms of information that they carry about, what happened, why is it that it is hurting so? And even if something is hurting, it means that there's a need, an essential need that is not being met, right? And so sometimes we grow up, oftentimes we may grow up in settings where we're asked to disconnect ourselves from emotion, to not feel certain things, or it's even put with labels that, these are for children, or these are, you have to tough up.
Are you still referring to men only, or this is more of a general?
I think it can be applicable to anyone, but why I'm saying this is that I think specifically for men, and it's not only in Rwanda, it's in many societies, there's this added pressure to really tough up, to really not show your emotions, but in many ways also to disconnect from your emotion. So you may grow up, and it can be also for a girl and a boy, but it's usually, asked from a boy most often. You may grow up with that reflex imposed or encouraged to suppress or deny that connection to your emotions, and even deny yourself the urge to share that with someone. So these are two very important things when we want to heal from something. We need to connect first, but also indeed if we're not able to do it alone, we need to be able to share it with someone. And by sharing it with someone, then something happens, someone who's open also to listen, of course. But if you grow up and when you share it, you're kind of, no, this is not appropriate, or you need to be, strong, a strong person. Strong person do not share. Strong person keep that for themselves. Then you can really have those reflexes as a grown-up, and then really it's a form of suppression or denying yourself of those connections. Unfortunately, these emotions don't go anywhere. They still are there. It's just maybe you turn a blind eye, or you develop a mechanism to not feel it. But then you can also be numb to other things, because we don't decide what we're numb to specifically. It's not like a chirurgien, really, this one I don't want to feel, this one. It can also numb you to other things. And so it can reappear either in the body, if you start having headaches or tense, or it can reappear in other ways you want to cope with. Marc was saying we might go out, but distract yourself from those emotions. It's a form of trying to distract yourself from an emotion that is still there, but you're not able to cope with, because maybe the tools aren't there, you haven't developed those tools, or you feel like it's not safe to share that. Then other coping mechanisms come to play, and they're not as helpful if you want. Then you're still in that loop because you haven't never addressed it or never healed from it.
Mm-hmm. But Marc talked about men coming together, maybe watching a football game together, having a discussion. But what I hear from you and Marc is that it is a form of connection, but it doesn't necessarily address the issues about our emotions, our struggles and all that. And you are saying that they don't leave us, they stay in our subconscious. And when you look at the numbers, it is quite worrying, because numbers say that, for instance, men commit suicide 4 times than women. And this is known globally. So what can be done for men to open up? As a professional, what do you think? What can we do differently to make sure that men are supported?
Mm-hmm. I think now we're talking about the aspect of stigma, right? And
well, stigma for our listeners and viewers, what is it? Mental health stigma.
Mental health stigma, even stigma is a form of social disgrace, I would say, that is put on you due to, it can be a behavior, it can be something that you have, a circumstance, and it's a mark, right? It's something that sticks to you.
That always comes from other people, or it can also come from ourselves?
That's a good point. It can come from both. Mm-hmm. So, but initially, it's from social norms initially, right? So let's say, I'm going to take this example because I also think it's interesting that certain diseases are attracting a form of stigma. Specifically, for example, HIV back in the days, huge stigma related to that. And then you have the stigmatizers, and they can do stigma in many ways. They can be afraid. That fear is a form of stigma. They can actively stigmatize someone. They can have a specific attitude. They can use symbols. All those things are different ways to put a mark on something, to put like a label, but also a label, I think, that also could be argued that it's a warning sign. A warning sign, watch out, this person is dangerous. For example, HIV, it's dangerous, you can catch it. We don't yet know how it happens. We don't have that stigma for cancer patients, for example. It's not dangerous. You have it, oh, sorry, let me be with you. But HIV, and I think mental health is also something like that we've been very much afraid of, because we were afraid of catching it, or maybe we thought that a family, if it has that, then it can transmit itself, then you don't want to marry into that family. So it's a warning sign. So I think it can play that role. But then also there's the stigmatized person who feels that and who can either perceive the fear of showing that they're going through something like that, HIV, or maybe also mental health struggles, or they've experienced it, or they self-stigmatize. They agree, this is, I don't know. They self-stigmatize, and then all of that is going to affect the fact that they're going to be able to participate in social activities, their isolation, or even just the simple fact of having access to services or looking for access to services on mental health. But that was one part of the question. I forgot the other one.
I will come back to that one. Maybe before we look into how we can break this stigma, I'd like to ask Mark, I know you are in different groups, networks. Have you ever seen, observed this kind of stigma Freya was explaining?
I think not particularly.
Especially towards men.
Not particularly, because at some point when you're going about your business, there are things you don't really want to not even not want. It's not that you're observing it. It might be present, but you don't observe it because your mind is not looking for that. But now that you've asked, I'm thinking about working in
still
places.
On that point, would you say that us being indifferent
Yes.
is also a form of stigma?
Yes and no. Yes, because some people be indifferent because they know, but no, because we are indifferent because we're ignorant about it. So our ignorance puts us in a position where we do not observe, we do not, we're there, but there are signs we don't see because it's not a thing that is talked about. And the reason I said yes for it being a stigma, it's because even those who are supposed to tell us what it is end up not telling us what it is. So then the ignorance comes from people who want to make mental health look bad, associate it with weakness, associate mental health with a certain group of people. For example, in Kinyarwanda, they say that men don't cry. It's women and children who cry. So when that is associated, it's a sign of weakness because it's associated to a certain group of people. So that's why I'm saying it's yes and no, because we don't have information that is readily available out there for us to even say, I'll consume it in this way. But also because we don't know, then we become indifferent, we don't see it. But also when it comes at a time when we are weak and we don't want to look weak. I don't know if it's making sense. So that makes it easy for us to self-stigmatize. But also when we see others, it makes it easy for us to stigmatize them because how would you be that weak? And then we'll come up with other defense mechanisms. Yeah. But going back to in my area of work, I think in my area of work, it becomes, it becomes very difficult for people to hide the emotions. It just depends on the time. So for example, think about from April 7th to those 3 months.
The 100
days of commemoration, anything can trigger people and they don't wait for it to be triggered. And the way they respond to that stimuli becomes very different. It will be words that are said, someone is listening to the testimony. They never hide that because, people will break out crying, people will,
It is instantly filled.
Yeah, it just comes and then you can see it. But also there is an expectation. So because I'm in a place where I expect that something might happen, then I'm alert to even that because if I'm having, let me say, a classroom and I'm speaking, then I'm alert because now I need to take care of these people. So because I'm alert and awake and I'm expecting it, it makes it easy for me to now start observing when it's happening or when it's starting, when people are showing some extreme emotions, even when they start with minor emotions, and I'm like, okay, this is, but remember, I'm alert to that is most likely going to happen. But the moment I change the environment and the timing is different, then my mind is not so much waiting for that. And because it's not, then it's very difficult for me to observe some changes with people, even with what is being said. Yeah.
The second part of the question I had for you was, you have defined what stigma is, and I wanted you to tell us about how this stigma affect men's mental health, and what could be the signs of someone struggling in silence because of this stigma.
So what could be the signs of people struggling in silence? I think Mark mentioned a couple. It can be in the behavior. It can be the person doesn't want to see anyone, or like isolates themselves. They can feel shame. You talked about weakness. They can feel ashamed to feel this low, and start disassociating themselves from activities that they liked. And anger. You mentioned anger, and actually, it's something that we don't know, or that we don't readily know that it can also be associated to depression. The anger can be another form of expressing pain. Maybe it's a form of expressing pain that is more acceptable for men than just saying, I'm hurt. They're going to be angry more often than saying, I'm hurt. So when we talk about sensitization or awareness of around mental health and depression, for example, and then you have a face of someone who's just crying, men might not be feeling, oh, that's not me, because there's only one aspect, but actually there are many aspects of it. So bringing the stigma down, you mentioned awareness, is making things safe for people to share, making feel them being able to connect. You talked about the commemoration period. It's a period where people, as you said, we expect. So it's also a safe space. Normally, it should be a safe space for us to connect to those intense emotions, when maybe during the rest of the year we try to disconnect from them. And so I was wondering also if there was not an aspect of, the strong, being powerful, having a sense of control, maybe dominance. And because when we say weak, it's weak par rapport à quoi? Weak because of, so it's weak in comparison to what? In comparison to being strong, to being the dominant person, and that if you educate someone on that axis, then there's no space for connection, because then you only worry about being the dominant one. If you start connecting, it's a different axis. It's an axis of connecting with you, connecting with someone else, and then that aspect of weakness is different. It's not the same. So changing the axis of accepting a different axis, challenging the initial one and accepting a different one, and to make space for connection. I think that also the benefit of connecting with ourselves is that we're able to connect better with other people too.
Connecting with ourselves. This question goes to you both, and is about, now we've understood, stigma, and we are talking about awareness, we are talking about connecting with our inner self and all that, but what could be the role of friends, family, community in helping, we are focusing on men today, in helping these men who are struggling in silence to regain their self-esteem, to regain their strength?
men are supposed to have different sorts of friends. And I'm saying this in terms of we are the kind that were meant to be giving. So, and we've seen ourselves that way in many ways. And the environment nowadays does not give that aspect of our self-expression as men in most ways. So because of that, and us being lone rangers, like I said, we end up even not having a friend. Literally, you'll have very many acquaintances, but you'll have no friend that you can talk to. Literally, you'll have no friend to connect with that deeply. Everyone is going to be shallow. So we need
and for those who use social media, who have, let's say hundreds of thousands of followers.
Yes.
They believe they have people around them. But
yes, but it's all shallow conversation. Mm-hmm. And the moment they try to be deep with who they are, then the friends don't accept it because they have lifted them to a pedestal of strength. Let me say if it's an influencer or someone who is big. So they look at them as people who are supposed to be strong. So the moment they deem themselves to be weak, even those friends don't want to allow them to be weak. So that becomes a problem in itself. But the connections you talked about, I feel like men need different kinds of friends. But the first one, they need older friends. Older friends who've walked that journey and they know what they've gone through. And they need those so that they can walk with them to tell them, hey, by the way, this is what you're facing, but it's normal. It's not abnormal that you're going through this.
How will they know?
That's what I'm trying to say. They need those friends. So having that group of people who are around you, who are older, who know that if you're going through A, B, C, D, F, G, we've all gone through it. It's okay. So that becomes the first group that they need to connect to.
But Mark, on that point, we are also faced with the issue of intergenerational, let's say, understanding of mental health, whereby you go to an old person and he tells you or she tells you, be a man, be strong. And that is another limitation.
Yes, but don't take mental health as a thing that stands alone. It's actually a mixture of many things that contribute to that mental health. So even that person to tell you be a man, stand, at times you need to hear it. And I'm saying that as a man, because that generation, there is a way they were coping. That's why I said you need certain groups of people, those older ones who you'll talk to, and then they'll tell you to man up, because there are some things where you'll need to man up. It's not out of the blue that you don't need to man up. But also you need peers who understand in today's context what mental health is, and not only just talking about mental health as a standalone subject. No. Talking about life in general, because I don't want to accept that mental health is just a thing in its own cocoon. No. I'm looking at it in terms of life as a whole. How do I go about life, which then contributes to my mental health, to be healthy or to deteriorate? So having those peers whom you're struggling the same way, whom you're going through the same struggles, to say, hey, by the way, I'm also struggling the same way, so that you can be able to open up, becomes a place to connect, but also a place where you can find healing. And then having younger people who are hopeful, optimistic, but also who are struggling with things that you can help out. So all these different groups give you a way to express yourself in different ways, to see yourself in the future, to see yourself now, but also to keep your optimism that you had as a young person, looking forward to a better life. So that way, when you start connecting with these different men, then it becomes a good thing, because you're learning from all groups of life. But also, we men also need people who are mature. Like, I don't want to talk to you and then the next day I feel like, what I talked to you about has gone out there and now they're going to see me in the position of weakness.
You mean confidentiality?
Confidentiality, but I'm looking at it in forms of maturity, where someone is mature enough to know that when they listen to me, then it's up to me and them, and we're walking that journey. So those mature people, those mature men that people can confide in, Now, I'm not talking about maturity in terms of age. I'm talking about maturity in terms of general understanding of life. And
probably compassion and,
and empathy
towards you.
and trust that we're going to develop, and the bond that you're talking about. That connectivity between me and that other man, me and those other men, the brotherhood that brings us together in many other things. It will be drinking, it will be football, it will be all these different things. It will be hiking, it will be going to the gym, and then you feel the pump, but you have some people to express to. That bond that comes in is what will contribute to my mental health in all these different aspects. Am I having struggles at home? Am I working with a peer who's going through the same struggles? Am I talking to an older person who've gone the same struggles and they have, gone through them and they're still going well? But am I also looking at younger people that I can contribute to their lives? So through receiving and giving and expressing, and that way, I think that's how we men connect. And because of that, then it contributes to our mental health, and it makes it easy for us to be in that group of peers, in that group of older men and younger men, to actually be able for us to express ourselves and heal mentally, but also to open up the deep things that we're in. So that way, it becomes easier for men to have their mental health going.
Wonderful. Freya, from a professional point of view, Mark has really detailed what we can do in different settings, friends, and all that. And I want to hear from you. What advice are you giving to men watching us today? What can they do to break the stigma surrounding mental health, but also the misconceptions we talked about, that, we are supposed to be strong, and the myth that is out there that, mental health is not a man thing.
I agree that mental health is part of life. It's how you feel inside, how you feel inside towards yourself, towards others, towards the world around you. It gives you a sense of your energy, to go about things in life, sense of happiness, sense of meaning, purpose. All of that is part of mental well-being. And so it's not a new thing. It's something that has, you live, you have that. It's not something that was invented recently. Maybe it was expressed in different words, but it's not something new. So we're not talking about something new. We're talking about how do we acknowledge that that inner world, and also how that inner world affects us as much as the physical body that we have. That a word, a kind word or a hurtful word is going to affect you. So we're not robots. Even if we don't show it, it might affect you deeply. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I want to come back to that notion of strength. We're social beings. So we were put on earth, we live in society, and we have resources in other people. So it's really not a weakness to connect, and also to connect to the hurt that we might have. When we have a social influencer, let's say the example of the social influencer who might share that they're not feeling well, I would argue that the person who would be rejecting that person are persons who also reject their own connection to their own feelings. Because let's say you have gone through something difficult and someone tells you about their own difficulties, chances are, if you've gone through the same, you will connect and you will find words and ways and empathy to embrace them. And if you don't, if your struggle is, I don't want to connect, chances are that wherever it's going to show up, you won't want to get near it. And it's for everyone. So also that's an important thing to understand. I think the comment "man up" can come from men and women. We can also have women say, oh, man up, oh, be strong, and things like that. I personally don't think that it's, I think it's the fast way to get a reaction. It's kind of a shortcut because it jolts someone into doing something, but it doesn't address the key thing. So we have to address the key thing. I don't think that we become weak by connecting with it and sharing, or even being able to listen to someone. Maybe you haven't gone through the same thing, but someone is telling you and you giving them the ear. I don't think we become weaker by just listening to them or allowing ourselves to express it. We might even share other things. We might say, you know what, that's life. That's life. I've gone through the same thing in my youth, and this is how I've gone through it. And even that comment, or just the realization that you weren't alone, that you aren't alone, that your father or grandfather went through the same thing, is in itself so healing, or I guess it gives some strength. Okay, so we're able to go through. But the comment man up, then it shuts me. It puts a barrier. It puts me alone. Yes, I will have a reaction. I will stand up. I will do the robotic thing, but I will not connect, and I will not connect with the person as well. And I will disconnect from available resources. And I know I might do the same I have a boy, I might say, be a big boy, but it's the same thing. But that thing is the shortest way for me to get that reaction that I want. Instead of, okay, what's up, what's happening? And I get those cries, and then listening to it and trying to find, it takes longer. But I believe it will give better results in the end, in terms of coping mechanisms and being able for that person to feel whole. Because if you disconnect, there's a part of you that's going to shut down. So you will disconnect from that as well.
And before we even move on, I don't think being strong and being a man is a wrong thing. I think we should be strong. What does it mean? Exactly. I think that's where the issue is, because being strong on the outside, yet you're suffering from the inside, is frailty in itself. It's waiting for you to crumble at some point where these, so there is that option of serving the optics. This is what they see, and this is what I want them to see. I don't think that's being strong. Being strong would be being mentally strong, emotionally strong, and physically strong, where you're healed emotionally, mentally, physically, and then you should, maybe what we should do as men is actually redefine what being strong means. When you redefine what being strong means, then it will be easier to even talk about mental health, because now it's not in the position of weakness, but it's in the position of our strength. Because that's how we relate. Take the two of us to football, or let us go run, or with yourself volleyball. The thing will be, I'll be wanting to win, and you'll be wanting to win. So that's a competition. But is it healthy, right? Where does our strength come from? So I feel like redefining strength, understanding that let's not serve the optics of what you see from the outside, but also see what goes on with our mental health, mentally. I don't want to use the word mental health. What goes on mentally with us, what goes on emotionally, physically, but also spiritually. You talked about me. How are we dealing with our spiritual being? How are we relating to our spiritual being? Is it health itself? Because also that will affect other things. So understanding that and knowing that it's not a position of weakness, then we'll redefine how men consider mental health, but also not looking at it as a standalone thing, but contributed to by all these other things that we live through in our daily lives.
Wonderful. And I also think that in redefining who we are as men, we also need to accept that seeking for help is a sign of, strength, not a sign of weakness. We are heading to the conclusion of our conversation today, and I just want to give you a chance to, give our viewers one or two things they can take away in terms of dealing, especially men, dealing with mental health struggles. And I will start with you, Mark.
I thought you'd end with me. I was expecting the expert to start.
We have reversed
so that I can learn from her. I think for me, the takeaways will be we shouldn't be lone rangers, like standalone. Community is a very important thing. The world today has pushed us to not even know our neighbors, but that's just the outside expression of what's happening inside. We haven't even taken time to know ourselves deep within what's going on with us. So at times things just feel like it's life going normally, but we don't take time to sit, refresh, think about what's going on in our lives and in our minds.
So what you're saying, we are normalizing abnormal things.
Yes, disconnection, being far from people. It's good thing to be seen to be a hard worker. It's a good thing to be seen like you're the one who sleeps less. You'll do all these different things, but you won't sleep. So when you're talking about it, you brag about, sleeping less hours. I remember different examples that people are giving of different strong people.
Fake impression.
So we're impressing people. And that's what I said. It's for the optics. It's for what they hear. It's the perception that we want people to perceive us with. But I think we need to go deeper. To pause. To think about ourselves, what's going on. To reconnect spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, but also to reconnect with the environment that we live in, to reconnect with the people that are around us, so that even that walking of the journey, at times, I'm not a professional, but I know if the community around you surrounds you, even in your deepest times, the hardest times, it's easier for you to walk through those times. So there is that reconnecting with the people, even having a hug, even having that physical touch, even being able to speak about some of the challenges. At times we speak about those challenges, not saying that this is who we are. We say, I've heard someone say this, but also being able to be the people who listen, just give a listening ear where we do not talk for the sake of talking, but even being the listener, being the shoulder to cry on. So all those different aspects will contribute to our good mental health. And I didn't talk about physical exercise. Very important. And it's a manly thing. So if you want to do a manly thing, yes, go exercise, go ride a bike, go to the gym, go play football.
Excluding women into sports.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about Men's Mental Health Month.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they should be excluded. I'm just saying because it's men we're talking about, so men should go and do this. But also, get a chance to be loved and love. Because these are things that we take for granted, but they contribute to our mental health. And giving back. I can say a lot of things, but I might not be on the right track. So I'll let the professionals take it.
As we conclude.
I'm going to take the last sentence and then continue with it. I really like the give yourself a chance to be loved.
Yes.
And because we in this process we also might deny ourselves the longing for love and longing for kindness, the longing for tenderness, kindness, just that. And it reminds me of a study, I think, in the US, and they were talking about, just physical touch, and how women would hug each other, those kind of things, and men would go on, without that, just kindness. Those things are also important. And why isn't it available for everyone? So I agree with what was said. Maybe one more thing. I think that we should involve them more in the design of mental well-being initiatives. Maybe the format in which it is for the moment is not adapted. Yes. Maybe there's a better format. So let's involve those new ideas of what could work better. Maybe this format is not a right fit, but there are better fit. And so that it's more accessible also.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you very much. We've come to the end of today's conversation. I want to thank you so much. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our different social media platforms. We are on X, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Search for Solid Minds and follow us. Until next time, my name is Claver Irakoze, and this is Live Out Your Potential.